Hey folks, welcome to yet another Fanfiction Friday, which is kind of an anomaly. It's a strange series to have on this channel that was originally designed just for whatever random nonsense I decided to create. This random nonsense is pretty specific though. It's a series where we write fanfictions, and how do we do it?
We have 3 elements that we put into hats.
Wow.
Characters, locations, and scenarios.
That was fucked up.
I know. We have all of these suggestions placed into separate hats. We draw 2 characters, 1 location, and 1 scenario from each hat.
You're a loose cannon.
I know. I'm basically God.
But if you also want to be a servant of God, you can suggest your suggestions for our fanfics, either characters, locations, or scenarios that you would like to see included in one or more of our fanfictions. Just one, actually, really. They won't all get into multiple ones. You could probably write character, scenario, location right now, and we'll write them down and throw them in our boxes, hats, whatever they are, I don't know, in the different category things, and we might draw them and credit you for giving them to us, because if there's one thing I'm good at, it's doing things that other people have already done for me. Please enjoy!
The following fanfics are based on existing properties. We do not own the rights to the characters or the locations associated with them. These stories are intended to be non-profit and are written for fun only. Each author was randomly assigned 2 characters, a location, and a scenario. Each contestant was given 30 minutes to finish their story. What follows is the shocking results.
Hello again. This week I got Captain Picard and Hank Hill as the characters. Hank Hill was suggested by LM4277. The location was the kitchen, and the scenario, inspired by the Kroll show, for those of you who have seen it, was too much tuna. When Hank Hill was told by Strickland that he needed to relocate for work, he thought he might have to move to Houston or Dallas or even Austin. While the last option sent a liberal chill down his spine, he would do what it took if it meant spreading the good word of propane to those who really needed it. And he knew Austin was an electric town, so he could think of no better candidate, aside from California, but those blue fools almost seemed beyond help. But rather than Texas or even United States-related options, Hank Hill was instead told that he would have to move to space. It was an intimidating venture, to be sure, but Hank knew that if there were any alien presences out there in the great unknown, they would most likely not know about propane. He had to do whatever it took to change that. So, tearfully bidding adieu to his wife and son, Hank bravely stepped onto the USS Enterprise and found himself lost in a bustling crowd of uniformed workers. Even now, weeks later, he wasn't quite sure what his explicit purpose was on the ship, but the fact remained that he was in deep space trying to peddle the wonders of propane and propane accessories. Hank Hill was in the kitchen now, giggling to himself in that slow, staccato Hank Hill way. Having found himself at a loss for things to do, he opted for something that was slightly out of character for him: pranking. Whoever walked through the door next would fall victim to the most eloquent and elaborate prank that Hank Hill himself could think of. Footsteps came from behind him, and Hank chuckled again. "You seem in good spirits today, Mr. Hill." The bold voice of Captain Jean-Luc Picard filled the room, and Hank felt a little more nervous about his prank. But still, heroes were created in little moments like these where they acted against their fear, and Hank had always wanted to be a hero. Hank glanced over his shoulder at his superior officer. "Oh, hey there, Captain Picard," he said as nonchalantly as he could. "It's good that you're here. Someone just let me know that you were hungry for some lunch, so I made you something." "That was quite nice of you, Mr. Hill," Picard said, and Hank turned around slowly to reveal his master plan. A tuna sandwich sat atop a plate, but it wasn't just any tuna sandwich. This tuna sandwich was 5 times as large as a normal one, with a piece of white bread dangling precariously over a 6-inch tall mountain of canned fish. Coincidentally, the replicator was currently out of tuna, but were anyone to ask, Hank would blame it on that Crusher boy that no one particularly liked. "Here you go, sir." Hank stifled a laugh, and Captain Picard gazed at the sandwich with no apparent emotion. "Boy, you do sure like your tuna, don't you, sir? Who on earth would order that much tuna?" Picard accepted the sandwich, smiling at Hank as though he wasn't handed enough tuna to feed a percentage of the crew members on board. "Yes, I'm quite familiar with the flack I get for asking for quite this much, but I tell you, sometimes there's nothing in this universe that beats the taste of tuna." Hank's face fell. He did not frequently make sandwiches, but even he knew that this was a ridiculous amount. he thought. But Picard didn't seem bothered. He simply thanked the other for his sandwich and went on his merry way back to his room. Hank was left alone in the kitchen, his first and only prank an utter failure. Hank was so devastated that he never sold propane again, disappearing into deep space. Some say they saw a man matching his description slinking through the black markets on some planets in the outer galaxies, but no sightings could be confirmed. So he simply vanished, a mountain of tuna haunting him for the rest of his days. The moral of this story is, don't try and prank anybody. It's the worst.
This fic stars the characters of Jaden Yuki, one of my favorites from Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, and Tracer, the mascot character for the video game Overwatch. I almost forgot what it was called. I was going to call it Widowmaker, and then I realized, no, that's just my favorite character. Rapture from Bioshock is the location, which was suggested by I Like Bats 123. I have a feeling that was the Count from Sesame Street who posted that one. And the scenario, which really threw me for a loop, was They Just Destroyed the World.
Don't worry, loves. Cavalry's here.
Tracer teleported herself across the dim hallway, her bright orange skin-tight outfit a stark contrast to the grim greys, blues, and greens that made up Rapture's limited palette. She dodged past a deranged splicer wearing a broken bunny mask as he screamed some pretentious 1940s obscenities at her, zipped out of sight of an electric turret as it honed in on her heat signature, and instantly transmitted herself out of a long cylindrical corridor as it began to buckle under the ridiculous water pressure surrounding the city. Rapture had been built for the elite, the artist, the genius. This was to be their home away from the doldrums of society. Here they could be anything they wanted to be, make anything they wanted, leave behind a legacy of greatness that the surface world could only dream up in their wildest imaginings. And this is what they made out of it. Not a dream, but a nightmare. Everyone turned into crazed psychopaths. Some sort of civil war had erupted and caused the beautiful underwater paradise to twist and bend until it all but washed away with the ocean's currents. It was a vestige, a symbol of humanity's own perpetual self-damnation. But all of this irony was lost on Tracer. Mostly she was here to shoot the bad guys and look fantastic while doing it.
Oi, Winston!
Tracer cooed, putting a finger to her earpiece as she reversed time to avoid a collapsing bulkhead shooting out of the wall as foam sprayed from the fresh opening. A moment later and she would have been pinned by it, her bones broken in several thousand places.
You got a lock on that transmission yet?
Negative, Tracer. Winston's gruff voice scratched at her eardrums as she fired a dozen automatic rounds off at a lumbering brute splicer in mid-charge, dropping him with an upsetting squelch.
You're going to have to search deeper. Get to the lower levels. That's where we last spotted it.
Tracer laughed impishly as she charged her chest-mounted device, admiring the pretty blue glow that emanated from it. She giggled and swung open one of the bulkheads that kept the ocean at bay, and at the same time snapped her fingers and activated the teleportation gear, launching herself at rapid speed into the sea, and skimming herself deeper into the city the way a child might throw a stone across the surface of a calm river. When she ran out of charge, she found herself staring into the face of a Big Daddy as it worked at repairing a damaged wall in the side of one of the underwater skyscrapers. Tracer wondered if they still qualified as skyscrapers when they were more like water scrapers? Ocean scrubbers? What would you call them? Well, either way, she didn't have the time nor the oxygen to debate the matter right now, so instead she used her long, muscular legs to kick the Big Daddy aside so that she could squeeze through the slender hole leading back inside. The Big Daddy made a dim barking sound that implied she had angered it, though its concern soon faded. She'd figured out that they were a fairly docile lot as long as you didn't try to really hurt them, or their adopted charges, the Little Sisters. Speaking of which, after she had gotten her bearings inside and had sufficiently dripped off any excess water, she found her target standing amidst a crowd of the tiny, ghost-like children. He was standing in front of a crowd of Little Sisters, his red jacket fluttering in the total lack of any breeze. His fluffy, reddish-brown hair was matted and wet, his face scuffed and bruised, but his dual disc was still in immaculate condition. He held it aloft in a defensive manner, his arms at an angle as he held in his other hand a trading card with a cartoon monster drawn upon it. His opponent, it seemed, was the big sister that had been protecting those little girls, and he had come between them.
I'm not gonna let you possess my friend, scary ghost robot lady,
Jaden Yuki joked confidently, his brash attitude reinforced by his brushing his thumb against the tip of his nose, as he brandished his trading card at the deadly hybrid of woman and machine.
So get ready to get your game on! Nah, love!
Tracer cried out at the boy, a member of a Dual Academy field trip who'd gotten lost on their latest expedition.
Those aren't normal little girls! Dozer! You don't have to tell me, fellow student. Nice raw yellow uniform, by the way.
Jaden smirked.
Actually, this is orange, mate.
Tracer blinked.
I know what's going on here. I figured it all out thanks to Cyrus's smarts. Good job, by the way, old pal.
Jaden turned to look in the corner of the room, where a young boy with blue hair and reading spectacles cowered with a look of pure abject horror in his eyes.
This place is haunted by robots. And as everyone knows, the best way to defeat a robot ghost is to challenge them to a game of Duel Monsters. I don't think. And win,
Jaden continued. It seemed to Tracer that this character was very used to long periods of time where he could monologue and was not the type to have rapid-fire banter.
So check this out. I summon elemental hero Sebastian. Whoa!
The big sister leapt forward and clasped Jaden between her metal fingers, reaching for his neck and beginning to asphyxiate him. An anime sweat drop appeared on Jaden's head, and he shrugged as the big sister threatened to crush his skull. Before he could turn blue in the face, Tracer fired a series of blasts that laid waste to the big sister's exoskeleton, turning her brain to so much grey matter. It matched the wallpaper.
Jaden Yuki, you massive nonce!
Tracer growled, slapping the boy lightly across the face.
What are you playing at? We gotta get you to the surface and fast, or your parents are gonna be right cross. Oh, were we planning to go back to the surface?
Jaden blushed, his hand reaching up to scratch the back of his head.
I figured we'd just stay down here and learn how to play Duel Monsters underwater. It adds a whole new element of fun to the game. Literally. Throw down a face down, I'm Jaden. Of course we're going back to the surface, you plonker.
Tracer snapped in her own cheery British way.
Why wouldn't you want to go back there? Because I just destroyed it.
Jaden stammered, his face contorting into a simplified, chibi version of his vacant expression.
I figured, hey, I've defeated everyone up there. Why not just press this convenient button that raises the surface of the ocean by several hundred leagues? That way I can start over and become the next Yugi Moto Underwodo. That's water, I was saying water.
Tracer stared into the face of Jaden Yuki and could hardly believe that this young boy had just destroyed the known world. Then again, upon consideration, she totally could believe it. Jaden Yuki totes destroyed the world.
Okay, so this week I had Sebastian McKellis from Black Butler, Marik Ishtar, who was recommended by Juliana Menifee, and teaming up in an igloo. It wasn't a task that he wanted to complete, but any order given to him by CL, Sebastian McKellis had to complete. Seeing that a few decades of taking orders meant an eternity of another soul to eat, he figured it was a decent enough trade-off. While he had pissed off the little brat, he wasn't expecting to have to go all the way to Mount Everest for ice to make ice cream. Regardless, he was one hell of a good butler, and he wasn't about to skimp on any task. As he trudged to the top of the mountain, he noticed a young man with a wild look in his eyes hovering over a body. "And what do we have here?" Sebastian called out to the man. "Your being here is just as questionable, so why don't you go on doing whatever you came here to do?" he said gruffly before rummaging the pockets of the body in front of him. "It doesn't appear as though you're going to rouse him," Sebastian said over the man's shoulder. "Well, he's dead and frozen solid, so I doubt that I would," he said with a wild look back at the black-haired man. "You've certainly piqued my interest, though I must admit I don't have too much more time before my master is going to need me," he said to the back of his head. "Good for you." Marik Ishtar was quite proud and insane, so he hadn't noticed that his joints had started to freeze and his body was starting to shut down. "Go back to your master and leave me to my," he said before falling forward over the corpse of a traveler that had died to the cold long ago. "Well, well," Sebastian said as he tenderly lifted the body. "You're too interesting to die in a place like this. Better warm you up so you can tell me more of this fascinating endeavor you're on," Sebastian said to the unconscious face. Marik awoke to the inside of an igloo that was rather impressive in size, with a fire burning rather brightly in the center that had a few fish roasting over its flames. "Ah, you're awake," Sebastian said as he poked the coals. "Why did you save me? Don't you have to get back to your master?" Marik huffed. "I can take as much or as little time as I need. If my master needs me, I can be there in no time at all," he said with some measure of tension growing between the two of them. "I would thank you, but you've only delayed me." "Au contraire," Sebastian said, pushing him to lay back down. "You're searching for something on this mountain, and I'm very good at finding things. It's your lucky day, because you've fascinated me. That means I want to help. Unless you know what a god card is or where to find it, I doubt very highly that you'll be of any use to me. I do not, but it's something that has now piqued my interest. Do go on." Marik sighed and looked into the flames of the fire he had noticed was made of coals, but somehow didn't melt through the snow. In fact, the coals were hovering slightly above ground. "Who are you?"
Merik asked. A hell of a good butler who made his way to Mount Everest to get some ice for ice cream. If that's what I was curious about, I would have asked. Who are you? Merik said with more intensity. Sebastian McKellis, butler extraordinaire and demon, first class, he said, eyeing over the young man in front of him. And what may I call you, my fine young lad? Marik Ishtar, he responded with his eyebrow raised. The pharaoh's body he was meant to protect was a fool's errand since his spirit resided in a young boy, so it wasn't terribly surprising to him that a demon could exist in human form as well. What powers are you capable of? Marik asked. Sebastian handed a roasted fish on a stick to him as he said, What would you intend to do with me? Sebastian said in a sigh voice. What would you be willing to do? Marik said as he stared blankly into the face of the smiling butler. Oh, you're fun. I can tell, Sebastian chimed. I'm under the control of a young brat who has struck a deal with me, Sebastian said, stiffening his body at the thought of the child. While I am certainly capable of ripping him limb from limb, I only have to deal with a few more decades of servitude before his soul will be mine for all eternity. Sebastian said, gauging the response of the young man. So he has to die, but not by your hand? Marik inquired. No, I have to help him settle some issues. Burned down house, corruption, dead parents. I'm sure you understand. Sebastian cooed. Well, I killed my father because I've been trapped underground, protecting a soulless body for my entire life, only to find that the spirit of the horrid body I was protecting now resides in a child. It's now my life goal to amass as much power as I can and rip that body to shreds for wasting my life. Marik said calmly to the red eyes that gazed harshly at him. If I can find these god cards, I can amass all the power I need. That's certainly an interesting tale, and you seem like a good sort of people to me, Sebastian said cheerfully. What if I were to help you achieve your goals much faster, and you helped me achieve mine? Sebastian said, drooling at the thought of the child's soul. What do you want? Marik said. His investment in this man was now higher than before. If I help you attain this power, you help me solve this brat's problems faster so I can be done with him sooner, Sebastian said, eyes ablaze. Marik looked at Sebastian and laughed. He leaned back onto the snow that was oddly comfortable and warm. He took a few bites of roasted fish and stared at Sebastian unblinking for a few minutes. Their eyes were locked, studying and calculating all the possible outcomes of manipulating each other. Or I could take the pleasure in ravaging you and leaving another frozen corpse at the top of this frozen rock, Sebastian said, his patience momentarily wavering. Oh, Sebastian, you and I are going to be fast friends, Marik said as he laughed while eating the remainder of his fish and crunching the bones in his teeth. Sebastian's eyes grew light and wild with delight and hunger as he responded while passing another roasted fish to his new counterpart. To friendship. Marik took the fish and made sure to lock eyes with the demon butler again. To friendship.
I don't know about you, Mariana, but I didn't think a single one of those fanfics was anything less than average.
I agree. I think they were all perfectly unremarkable.
Really, really okay.
Yeah.
But I tell you what, if there's one thing that will make them more than okay, it's if you write in your suggestions for characters, locations, and scenarios. See, usually people say and or.
Yeah,
I went with the what do you call it?
You're changing up the status quo.
I went for the unorthodox option.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I chose or and. I'm bringing it back.
Okay.
But you can make suggestions, and we will use your suggestions if we draw them at random out of a hat filled with dozens and dozens of other suggestions, a lot of which are from other people who've commented. But if we do use your stuff, we will credit you and we'll talk about how great your idea was before we read our story, and likely butcher it.
See, I just love that people make suggestions because it means I don't have to anymore.
Oh, I love writing suggestions.
I like writing suggestions once in a while, but like, I'm dry. I'm dry.
Turn it off, we're dry.
There's only so many times I can write Iron Man before I just get sad.
But how can you read them?
How can I read them? Oh, if you go to our archive of our own fan fiction page called 3 Hats, it's linked down in the description, then you can see all the other fan fictions that we've written over the last 2 months or so, and some before that as well.
Some of them are okay too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd say definitely all of them are at a basic okay level.
Yeah, we've definitely had a lower level education. If you read them, you can tell.
Yeah, you certainly went to a school.
And if you've gone to a school, you'll tune in next week and enjoy Fanfiction Friday.
Thanks for watching.